Hello, this is Sarah, Painty Creator here, and welcome. Guess what? I did a whole painting and forgot to press play or record. So this was my painting that I thought I'd recorded for you. A nice autumn walk through the forest, but I hadn't pressed record. So I'm just going to go through this. So it's the same sketch, and all we did was to start with this background colour, dropping in the blue and then these lovely autumn tones with cadmium yellow and cadmium red mixed in, dropping some distant blue ultramarines into the base, and then mixing some very faded brown with the cadmium red and yellow together, and a little bit of burnt umber, and dropping those in to create sort of more trees through the forest. We popped the shadows on using some ultramarine blue, and then these sides are just ultramarine blue and yellow ochre, cadmium yellow and ultramarine, and then yellow ochre and cerulean blue. And then we pop the people on, and these more prominent trees, which are burnt umber and indigo as their base. So if you want to have a go at that, that's fine. So I've drawn exactly the same sketch out, and I'm not very good at ever doing the same painting more than once unless I'm having to do it on Zoom. So I thought, just for fun, we could give it a go as a wintry scene. It might even make a card, you never know. So let's give it a try. I'm using my usual Creative Peak watercolour paper. I find this is really good value for money and it works well. I paint nearly every day. It's really good for my mental health, but I do not have a lot of money, so therefore I need something that is usable but reasonably priced. This works out about 25p a piece for it. And then my mainstay watercolours are Cotman watercolours. These are technically student grade colours, but they have good vibrancy and you don't need a lot. You can buy tubes to refill them, or you can buy a refillable little half pan. These are half pans, and full pans are sort of bigger rectangles. But you don't need my paper or my paints in order to do this. Just use whatever you can get your hands on. Sometimes you can pick them up fairly cheap, and even if you get given a set of watercolour tubes that are like this, you can cut them open and use the paint that's inside. If it's even hard, you can cut them open with a Stanley knife, wet them, and you will still be able to use the paint. Don't throw them away. So 2 jars of clean water. I'm going to be using a range of brushes, but I really do like my Meeden mop brushes. I'm going to need one with a reasonable point, and perhaps seeing that we're going to go into winter, I might use my little zero rigger brush as well. With that, plenty of paper towel, always good at keeping control. So spritz your paints, and let's get painting. If you are enjoying my Patreon site, please do let me know. It's a new venture that we set up because people were misusing some of my materials that I was sharing freely, but I do want it to be a reasonably cheap space, And if you're joining and you're not part of our ME long COVID community, we do have Zoom sessions that you are welcome to come along to every couple of weeks. Please do get in touch with that, because it'll be a joy to welcome you. So fresh water straight in to that on here. So I'm just going to let the water soak in. I'm going around these main trees. If I end up with water with paint on these trees, it's not the end of the world. I'll be able to paint over them, but I do want to try and sort of keep hold of that clean paper. And I'm just going to wait for a little minute to let that water soak in. It makes life a little easier to work with the paint. So I'm going to start off with some cerulean blue for the sky, just dropping it in because it's a nice bright winter's day. So a little bit of cerulean blue in the sky. And you'll know by now, if you've been painting with me for a while, that the top of the sky is generally a little bit darker and more blue, if we're doing blue, than other parts of the sky. So if you're going to just darken somewhere, just drop an extra little bit of pigment around the top of your paper. I'm working on a slope. My paper is taped to the board, just using normal decorator's masking tape. You can use washi tape, you can use all sorts. That just helps everything just sort of come to the bottom. And because it's a nice winter's day, I'm going to mix up a nice sort of browny yellowy colour. So this is just some new Gamboge yellow, which is a warm bright yellow, and I'm just going to add some burnt umber into the mix just to make a nice bright backwash to this. And I'm just going to paint on some very distant trees and bushes. Reload my brush. I'm just going to use my brush just to soak up those beads of water, because if you don't control them, they come back to bite you. They end up with big blooms exactly where you didn't want them, and end up messing all your colours up, and it just looks a mess. So I'm just mixing a little bit darker brown. I'm just going to drop a bit more brown, less yellow, same mixture. And a bit thicker mixture still, just brown. So that's going to dry quite light because we've got the water that was on the background, but it draws the eye nicely. So I'm just going to do a little bit of burnt umber and a touch of ultramarine together. A little bit thicker mix, less water. If you need to control it, use your paper towel. And I'm just going to drop in some distant trees. I'm actually going to get my little rigger brush for this. Otherwise we're going to end up with a big blob. So roll my rigger brush on my paper towel and we can just go back over there. And these will dry lighter, but I start wanting to put some of the sort of more distant forests in. So these are the sort of distant trees in the forest. If you're struggling, just add a little bit of water into your paint and that will just add a little bit of allowing it to fade into the background nicely. Always controlling your paper towel. So, a nice way of just building some of those trees. And they're something and nothing, but they are really helpful when it comes to building the depth in the paper. Don't know why I've ended up with that one there, but we'll come back to that and this one in a bit. We'll darken those in a bit. Just add in a few sort of twiggy bits. They're winter trees, so it's a nice way of always controlling the water on your paper towel. Okay, I don't want to overdo it too much, but I do want them to feel like that they are there. Oh, nice. So I'm going to now give that a little bit of a spritz with my spritzer bottle, just to put a little bit of texture in. So I'm going to hold my spritzer bottle from a distance, give it a squirt, let it dry in, and it just allows some of this light mottly bit to come in the background, and I just love that. Once you've got it to a point where you're happy with the background, that's when you grab your hairdryer and give it a dry. So here we are, and we are back with our dry painting. As you can see, we've got some lovely light bits that are coming through, and it's got that sort of nice bright background that we can work with. I do want the snow of the landscape to stand out, so in order to do that I want the trees here and in the midground to be darker than you would normally paint them. So in order to do that, I'm going to mix quite a dark mixture together of indigo. So this is just indigo blue, quite thick mixture I'm after, and either neutral tint or burnt umber, so you get a really nice scrummy dark brown. I'm just washing my brush out so I'm going to start with this big one, because this needs to be the darkest and the most expressive. So just wetting it down. Clean water, which is why we have 2 lots of clean water. And I'm just going to run some indigo through the tray. And I'm conscious that I want the light to be coming from the left. I better draw my little smiley sun on. The light's coming this way, well, probably more that way, but it's coming from the left. So then I'm going to drop in some of this really dark indigo and brown tone. It's just got a bit of a branch coming off here. This one. So it's working wet in wet, so this will dry lighter, and we will have to add some texture over the top. But I love working wet in wet. It's like having a bit of a play with the watercolour to me, where you're sort of working with it in order to get the colours and textures and shapes that you want. So I'm just going to add a little bit of burnt sienna into here with some indigo. So I still want that sort of darkness of colour. I'm just going to drop that in as well. So this is my light side. Sort of trying to work with what we've got. Get the shape that I'm after. If you're not comfortable using your large mop brush, just swap to something that you are comfortable with. So I'm going to let that dry. Whilst it's drying, I'll keep an eye on it, because once it's lost its shine, I can work it in with a little bit of water to get some nice texture there. I'm just using a thirsty brush there just to mop up the excess, but I like the depth of tone there. So I'm going to carry on using the same technique on these two. So a little bit of clean water, or cleanish water, because my brush isn't clean. And some of that indigo into that. Now I don't want it as dark as this one was, because this is in the foreground. These are mid-tone trees, but I want the same feel. And again, these will dry lighter. We can put some extra tone on later. If you happen like that, just put a broken branch on or something. Nobody knows what these trees look like. You were there. You're in the forest. They're not. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to get a brush and just put that into the painting a bit more, as if they're grounded into there. Burnt umber with some indigo in. Just dropping into these trees. Painting like this just lets the watercolour do its thing and stops you worrying about the tonal values of things too much, because you know it's going to dry lighter. So whilst I've still got that on my brush, I've picked up my smaller mop brush. Still that indigo and burnt sienna mix. Such a beautiful mix of colours for winter trees. Just going to soften that one in as well. A little rigger brush. Just going to put a couple of branches on. And just work with what you've got, what comes. It's all part of things. Now I've just mixed a bit of a thicker, darker colour. So whilst this is drying, I'm just going to tap that in. So this is the darker side. Tap, tap, tap. If if you're worried, control it on a paper towel before you go in, but as long as you're you've not got big puddles on, it will work. That's too wet still. Okay, up here, just going to go in with my little spritzer bottle onto this tray. Just keep it going. Bit of dark. Just using the side of the brush to build a little bit of texture into this tree trunk that goes across the front. I've picked up some darker paint there so I can just darken some of these bits. Okay, back to my little mop brush. So I've got two main trees here on this left and one coming across. When you look at trees, you'll notice that where you've got branches that go off like that, they tend to be darker. Just keep looking at your surroundings, look at photographs, look at paintings, and you will see that they come. So I'm just darkening these that we did earlier. And you can build as many trees in the background as you like. If you've done one and you think, oh, I don't like that, just paint over it, it's fine. Nobody will know. That needs to be a bit darker. A few little twiggy bits. I'm just going to darken the inside of that one. You can play with this as long as you want. Wash your brush, take some water out, soften it away. So we've got a really nice start of the path. Just going, while this is drying, I'm just going to go in again with a little bit more of this dark mixture with my little rigger brush. Just to build that tree sensation up. Maybe a little bit more on here. Again, you don't want too much. So at this point, we're at the point where we need to dry everything, and then we can start thinking about our snow. So here we are, and we're near enough dry. I think this has worked really nicely to get some texture and some detail there, because you want the detail in the front, and then as you go back into, that's how we get the depth in the painting. So time for a little bit of snow. So I'm going to start off, I've got clean water, and I'm going to start off with just a really watery mix of yellow ochre to start building that sort of idea of texture and movement through our painting. So even though we've got a path, we've still got that sort of idea of banks and snowy bits along there. And rarely when we're doing watercolour is snow just white. It tends to have different colours and depths on it, and the sun, the sun shining through, I like to use yellow ochre for. It's a nice sort of mixture. So I'm going to go with a little bit of ultramarine blue with a tiny bit of alizarin crimson. You should know by now, that's one of my favourite shadow colours. Plenty of water. Let's get some clean paper towel, and I'm just going to use that to build the sort of shadows and depth around the base of some of these trees, and shadows on the snowy bank. So this is where your brush starts telling the story of the contours of the path and what's around. If you want to just soften one, take a paper towel and just rub the edge, and it will soften into your paper. It's how we start to draw the sort of contours and what's going on. So need a bit more mixing. And the direction of your brush strokes just help build that sort of idea of where the depth is. And I'm just going to mix a bit of a darker colour and just drop it around and up some around those tree areas. To get some of those shadows coming on the trees. And it's just a gradual work with these two to do that lovely yummy purpley mixture for your shadows. It's a nice bright day. Just building up a little bit of a story about what's happening. Maybe we've got a tree here that is going to cast a shadow as well. So you're building a story about what's happening around the landscape, deepening some parts, okay, so quite like that. That's worked quite nicely. And now I've got a feeling of undulating landscape that's covered in snow without too much of a worry about exactly how big the snow is and what's going on. So now I am going to pick up some sap green, and I'm going to just drop a little bit of ultramarine into there just to darken it, and a little bit of burnt sienna. Ooh, a lot of burnt sienna there. I have to put a bit more green and blue into there. So I'm looking for that sort of winter green colour. Sort of like olivey, end of winter green. So I'm just going to flick on some grasses into the landscape around these trees. I do find that it suddenly brings a winter scene alive, just putting a few grasses in hollows and spaces, just sort of poking through. as normal, less is more. It just adds a little bit of something. Remembering to change the direction of your brush strokes so that they don't all look regimented. Further away are smaller, less detailed. And then around those little clumps of grasses, I'm going to add a little bit of shadow colour to them. So it looks a little bit like they've popped through. If you're not sure about doing this, you can also do it with a pen afterwards. That works nicely, a bit of ink pen. I might even do a little bit of ink pen on here after, but it's a nice way of just adding a little bit of something. So at that point, that is a nice painting. You could leave it there, but in my other painting of autumn, I was brave and painted some people, so I am going to see whether I can be brave again. So I'm going to dry this off. So here we are. Quite like this. I like the texture on that, and that will draw us our eye to these people really quite nicely. So let's just see if we can draw them again. I always think it's been brave drawing people into, because I don't draw very much, so drawing people and animals and things like that into painting, I think, is always a bit of a big girl step for me. But once it's dry, you can always rub out watercolour, and so therefore it's not too bad. So yeah, a lady with a dog, or a man with a dog, a person with a dog. We're going to go for this little one. I had him holding hands up here, didn't I? Little one. And then somebody maybe a bit too tall there. There we go, that's better. A little coat. I did a pair of trousers on that one. So, little family. So what I need is a little bit of thicker paint to go over the top of these, and to draw an eye to them I need it to be a little bit brighter, but not overly bright. I don't want it to be so bright that you think, oh crikey, that's a bit OTT. So let's start with our little doggy. I used to have a black lab and a little black staffy, so I quite often like drawing and painting black dogs because they could be one of ours. But obviously you do whatever you want, but just keep it nice and simple. Just keep it simple. So I'm going to go for a bit of a sort of a reddy coat for the lady again. I used to have a bright red and yellow, a red and white, sorry, a red coat with white polka dots, which I used to love, so maybe this is me. I'm just going to darken that a little touch with a little bit of ultramarine blue in there. I'm just going to darken this side of the coat. Just helps get a little bit of a feel of movement. A little bit of a darker trousers, and then I'm going to put some black wellies or black boots on. There we go. Going to lift a little bit of light going forward, and some brown hair. I think this is just some Van Dyke brown here. And it is winter, so I think she can have a matching red bob out on. There we go. There we go. So let's do the little one. You can just have a blue coat, I think. Nice contrast with that red. So I think this is cobalt blue that I'm picking up. If you haven't got cobalt blue, it's ultramarine and cerulean mix. A nice bright blue. I'm just going to put a pair of darker trousers. I think little one could have some yellow wellies. That would be quite fun. Don't worry about the pencil lines. Once it's dry, we can wash them out, rub them out even. So maybe a nice bright yellow bob out as well. Quite colour coordinated this family. So a bit of green and yellow ochre mix for our gent's coat. Maybe he's got a trendy barber. A bit of this dark on this side just to put a bit of a shadow colour in while it's damp. And some grey trousers, I think. A little bit of hair. And there we have our family off for a little stroll in the woods. So at the point where I'm probably going to give it a dry and then step back and see what we've done. So here we are, we're dry. I've given them a bit of a rub out, and I've just dropped an additional little tiny shadow just so that they've got their own little shadows there. Don't know if I've got anything left in the brush, but and I need to give it a sign. I think I'll sign this side today, and then gradually take my tape off. Always pull the tape away from your painting, because if it is going to tear, it will tear away from your painting and not ruin your painting. And I'm hoping that A, I've pressed record unlike before, and B, that you've enjoyed that little one and that you'll join in and share your painting. So this was the one that I forgot to record, and this is the winter one. Maybe we'll have a spring one, hey? But you can see how the same starting point can bring two very different feelings of paintings. So enjoy. Let me know what you think. Drop me a comment, a link, share our Patreon site with your friends, encourage people to say hello. So happy painting, and we'll see you soon.